All art is quite useless. So ends Oscar Wilde's preface to the picture of Dorian Gray. And today I want to break down this preface because it has a list of quite thought-provoking, perhaps controversial, challenging precepts and maxims regarding art and morality. So let's break it down and let's talk about whether we agree with it or not. And I would implore you to comment in the comment section below on any part of the preface that enraptures you, engages you, enrages you, amuses you, or bemuses you. So, The Picture of Dorian Gray, firstly, great novel. He got into a lot of trouble for writing that book, to put it mildly. Oscar Wilde, he was put on trial basically because they thought it was an obscene book. They thought it was an immoral book. And if you know anything about Wilde, you know that his contention is essentially that there's no such thing as an immoral book. Art is either good or bad. Let's think about that. So the preface begins, the artist is the creator of beautiful things. Okay, simple, or seemingly simple, but perhaps not. Beauty, there's a huge tradition of examining what the difference between, say, the beauty is and what the difference between the sublime is. Beauty traditionally is dainty, delicate, and sublime is like awe-inspiring and powerful and fearsome. The artist is the creator of beautiful things. Now, it seems like a simple statement, but do you agree from the start? That's the thing. This is how you read Plato, for example. You read Plato, and they all begin their dialogues, their Socratic dialogues, by defining their terms. Can we all agree that this is this? Very often, though, the proposition from which they are starting from, we rarely, if we're not reading correctly, we rarely examine it and see if we actually agree with it. The thing I don't like about Plato, now, I do like Plato because he's a writer of great imaginative power, but what I don't like is that he'll say, can we all agree that money is evil? Yes, Socrates, we can agree. And it's like, hang on a minute. I don't agree with your starting premises, but then it just goes on and on and on for pages, and whatever conclusion you get to is nullified by the fact that you don't actually agree from the starting point. Anyway, do you agree the artist is the creator of beautiful things? I think the artist can be the creator of beautiful things. The artist is also the creator of powerful things, thought-provoking things, emotional things. That's my personal opinion. To reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. Again, it really depends on who the artist is. If you're talking about Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, if you read Anna Karenina, he's basically somewhat invisible in his novel. He can go in and out of all the different characters' heads. He even goes into the mind, the interior of a dog at one point, masterfully. And Tolstoy is very much unobtrusive. Flaubert was somewhat unobtrusive as well in regards to his novel. Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, Hunchback of Notre Dame, he was not unobtrusive. He was very much a big figure in his novel. If you go back to some of the earlier novels, I'm thinking Tristram Shandy, I'm thinking Tom Jones. You can really hear the voice of, for example, Fielding. Jane Austen, I can perceive some of her voice. She does it very masterfully, and she set the groundwork and paved the way for writers like Tolstoy in order to do this free indirect discourse. But I can discern Austen. Does that mean she's not successful as an artist? I don't think so, but to reveal art and conceal the artist is art's aim. Again, I think that's one of art's aims, and very often you know you're in the presence of something beautifully rendered, a great work of art, if you stop thinking about the artist, if it just becomes like nature. You don't even question who produced it. But hey, very often, if you talk to scientists, they will question who created beautiful flowers, for example. So then you get into the wrestling with theology and like, is there a God, is there not a God, all that sort of thing. The critic is he who can translate into another manner or a new material his impression of beautiful things. So I don't like the word criticism. I much prefer the term interpretation. And that means that you create a new work yourself in your interpretation, in recording your impression of the work. Unfortunately, critics today, and this is very much true, you'll see this in academic circles, criticism means taking the writer out of their context, damning them, cutting them down, listing their vices, charging them with whatever crime against humanity they can think up, whatever they can read between the lines or not of the text. Hey, I don't think that's criticism, and I don't think that's a creation of your own piece of art. When I do the podcast and when I do the lectures in the Hardcore Literature Book Club, that is my expression, that is my autobiography, and it's my art form. I put a lot of care into it in the same way that an artist would paint the brushstrokes with certain direction, certain gusto and verve. And so yes, I agree with that, but we're lacking critics today, and I think there's definitely a need for proper critics. There's a need and there's a gap in the market, so to speak, for people who are going to create works of art in their response to other works of art, and we're ready for it because we felt a lack of it for a while now, and we're definitely ready for it. Let's go on a little bit. The highest as the lowest form of criticism is a mode of autobiography. Yeah, okay, this is where I got this from. This is very much me working in a Wildean sense. I hope that when I respond to art, I imbue it with my own personality, my own temperament, my own lived experience. It is so much more interesting to read the faithful, honest, sincere account and impression of someone responding to a book, for example, than to just read their straight autobiography. Straight autobiography can be boring, especially if the person is not anyone of acclaim or hasn't lived a particularly interesting life. Now, take a common person who's not lived a particularly interesting life and get them responding to artwork in a nuanced, thoughtful, tender, caring fashion, and then you have a riveting autobiography. Then you want to know more about them. Those who find ugly meanings in beautiful things are corrupt without being charming. This is a fault. This is Wildean wit, very ironic, wry, probably solicits a small smirk out of one corner of your mouth. Let's read that again, because that is so pertinent, and this is like an adage to our age. It's an instruction, it's an imperative, it's a warning shot to the critics working today. Those who find ugly meanings in beautiful things are corrupt without being charming. This is a fault. So people often ask me to make comment on things that I don't like, to make negative lists of things that I damn. And the thing is, we are drawn to negativity. It's a confirmation bias. Everything in our life can be perfect, but if we have just one niggling thing, one little problem, like a stone in our shoe, then we're unhappy. And funnily enough, yes, when I do make a comment negatively or am a little bit critical, that stuff does end up being rather popular, but I don't want it to be the default. The default should be loving, appreciation, relishing, savouring, enjoying. So I don't really like to do that very often. I think we should admire the art that we profess to love. We should admire it. And there's enough negativity in the world. You can find it in all corners of the internet. You can find it in your day-to-day life. That's why when I created the Hardcore Literature Book Club, there's not many rules, but there are some underlying sort of invisible rules, and one of them is to not be too negative. We want a good vibe, and actually we do have a good vibe. We don't want to drag too much contemporary commentary into the mix unless we can say something positive about it. Like I said, most the negativity and the ugly meanings, they've already been covered. It's the positivity that has not been covered that we're in dire need of. Those who find ugly meanings in beautiful things. Now, can you think of many people who do that? If you want to go into an academic circle and talk about Shakespeare, I bet you could come out with people who manage to find ugly meanings in beautiful things. Are there ugly things lurking there? Of course there are problematic plays. Wilde even sort of somewhat touches upon one in referencing Caliban in one of his next maxims, Merchant of Venice. We can go on, but to find exclusively ugly meanings in what is primarily a beautiful work of art is... yeah, to put it mildly, that makes you corrupt without being charming. And I like that Wilde leaves some room for being corrupt, because you can be corrupt and be charming. But he says this: the worst sin in the world of Wilde is to not be charming. And to be corrupt without being charming, that is a fault. And then he goes on, those who find beautiful meanings in beautiful things are the cultivated. For these there is hope. Well, yes, because if you think about it, that's your impression to everything. I've recently picked up James Baldwin, one of my favourite writers. I picked up his Notes of the Native Son. I'll show you, it's a really beautiful edition. Got it here. This is a Library of America. I've started collecting these. These are really lovingly put together. As usual with these books, I like to take the dust jacket off because Baldwin's in a lush, verdant green, and he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest, civil rights writers ever, and he talks about those who treat him with contempt or hatred, and he says that this belies a hatred for everything, everyone, and above all yourself. And I think this is somewhat what Oscar Wilde is touching upon here. This is something I thoroughly agree with. Those who find beautiful meanings and beautiful things are the cultivated. For these there is hope. And that's true. And I think if you can find beautiful meanings and beautiful things, then there is hope for you. It bespeaks a good direction in your life. It bespeaks a vibe of positivity and light. It's a good thing. And that's what we're trying to do together, isn't it? They are the elect, to whom beautiful things mean only beauty. So what he's talking about here, he's touching upon a Walter Pater idea, but this was a preoccupation that was running through the fin de siècle, the turn of the century, with the symbolist writers, the French writers. This idea that the idea of art for art's sake, that you do not want to burden art with any other obligation. Art does not need social utility. Now, I do differ somewhat here. I don't think art needs social utility, but I think art can have social utility as a subservient purpose. Now, Victor Hugo's Les Miserables is very heavy-handed with its social justice, but it still works as a work of art, a marvellous work of art, endlessly influential, endlessly rereadable. Now, there are those works of art that are usually pesky book prize winners, and they have just social purpose. That is the only reason they've been written and the only reason they've been read. And I would also defer to what James Baldwin says about these novels, the protest novels. They're the most problematic novels of all and bespeak. The person decrying every ist in the book is the person who catalogues every ist in their own soul. So what we want to do is we want to create art that's beautiful in and of itself for its own sake. Okay, you don't demand that a vase have social utility. You don't demand that a Wagnerian opera have social utility. Now we're coming to a very famous maxim. There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Would you agree with that? If you disagree, you're in fine company, because even some of the greatest writers of all time, and I'm thinking of Tolstoy again, would disagree. If you read Tolstoy's What is Art, something that we pulled apart, a tract that we pulled apart both in the Hardcore Literature podcast and in the book club, he seemed to think that good art was a sincere transference of religious feeling. So essentially, art does have a moral duty, according to Tolstoy. But Tolstoy, who was such a tremendous artist, tremendous writer of great feeling, was not the best critic. He damned Shakespeare and Cervantes and Beethoven. He didn't like anybody apart from Dostoevsky and Victor Hugo. Is there such thing as an immoral book? I certainly do read certain books and I can feel dirty, or I can feel corrupted, I can feel guilty. But the worst guilt I've ever felt with a book is reading a book that has no redeeming aesthetic qualities whatsoever. Now, that's not to damn Pulp Fiction, but definitely, as long as a book speaks to you, as long as a book is beautifully crafted, compelling characters, great narrative, and is thought-provoking, I think that's good enough. And there are certain books that have been banned and censored and burned through the ages. I don't think that means that they're immoral. I think it simply means what Oscar Wilde is about to say. He says books are well written or badly written, that is all. The 19th century dislike of realism is the rage of Caliban seeing his own face in a glass. Caliban, the half-human, half-monster of The Tempest. The dislike of realism is the rage of Caliban. Yes, so we read something that's realist, and if we damn it and don't like it very often, it's because we see ourselves contained in it. So, Oscar Wilde put on trial for The Picture of Dorian Gray. Did they see themselves in the book a little bit too much? And I think that's what the most uncomfortable thing about The Picture of Dorian Gray is that ability to somewhat see yourself. And if you find it repulsive, you may find it repulsive in the same sense that you might find your own shadow terrifying and repulsive. The line between good and evil runs straight through the middle of every human heart. It's a Solzhenitsyn quote, and it's true. And it's endlessly plagued humanity as a preoccupation. We can see that in Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Hyde. We can see that in everything, really. So that's something to think about. Do you protest too much if you dislike a certain genre or a certain book or a certain writer? The 19th century dislike of romanticism is the rage of Caliban not seeing his own face in the glass. Can't win with the critics. Either they dislike it because it reminds them of themselves too much in a negative way, or they don't see themselves in it at all. Either way, these are not These are not people that you want reading your work, essentially. The moral life of man forms part of the subject matter of the artist, but the morality of art consists in the perfect use of an imperfect medium. No artist desires to prove anything. Even things that are true can be proved. The perfect use of an imperfect medium. This is a tension that artists have always struggled with. Flaubert talked about les mots justes. Conrad said that above all, his purpose is to make you see. And the writers like James Joyce would labour over words for entire days. I think there was an anecdote with James Joyce struggling over 7 words in a sentence, and that being a good day for him. Getting the most faithful replication, the perfect word. The problem is, and this is a problem that a lot of artists take into their heart, that which we can find words for, this is a Nietzschean idea, is something that's already long dead in our hearts. We have these concepts and they mean slightly different things to everybody, like love and money and justice and peace and war. But the moment we can say something like I love you is the moment that we reduce or strip apart the actual genuine and sincere meaning of the words. That which is true and sincere always transcends language. No artist has ethical sympathies. An ethical sympathy in an artist is an unpardonable mannerism of style. Yeah, and a lot of books today have unpardonable mannerisms of style, ethical sympathies. Now the thing is, I think you can have ethical sympathies, but I like to believe that someone can have a sort of humanistic strain where they don't exclude anybody or anybody. They don't by overtly needing to include. We can go down this route, I suppose, but I feel like we've already touched upon it before. No artist is ever morbid. The artist can express everything. Well, can he? Can the artist express everything? That kind of flies in the face of that Nietzschean idea that I just touched upon, so I'm not sure about that one. Thought and language are to the artist instruments of an art. Vice and virtue to the artist materials for an art. From the point of view of form, the type of all the arts is the art of the musician. From the point of view of feeling, the actor's craft is the type. Yeah, Walter Pater said all art constantly aspires to the condition of music. He said that in the studies in the history of the Renaissance. I have come to disagree with that over time. Now, many artists wish that they were musicians or could render the Dionysian, like, drunken revelry aspect into their writing. Some want to be more like painters, which is more Apollonian, and it's to do with form. And I used to think that the highest form of art would be a blend of the two, which would probably be film. But recently I've come to believe very strongly that literature is the highest form of art and a novel is the highest form of art. And I don't say that in a sense that I don't enjoy other art forms. I just think there is no other art form that you can engage on such a deep level with your own thoughts. Now, music does something different. Painting does something different. It's similar, but it's different. And film, unfortunately, it's too external, and you really cannot fully understand everything that you're seeing on the screen, whereas a book affords you endless time to really examine everything. So all art is at once surface and symbol. Those who go beneath the surface do so at their peril. I think Hemingway said something similar to this. Those who read the symbol do so at their peril. It is the spectator and not life that art really mirrors. I like that. It is the spectator and not life that art really mirrors. Books are mirrors, and they're mirrors held up to ourselves. They don't actually faithfully represent society or the greater world. There is no objective experience. You cannot objectively, empirically, faithfully report reality. It's all subjective. It's all seen through the prism of our lived experience, our conditioning and upbringing, our faults, our strengths, everything is tinged with our own persona. And so when you read a book, if you read it deeply and if you read it well, you learn something about yourself. Do you learn something about the world? Perhaps not, but maybe you learn how you operate in the world that you create in your mind. Diversity of opinion about a work of art shows that the work is new, complex and vital. He's basically given a middle finger to the censorship and the trials. He's saying, hey, we're all disagreeing here. That means this work is new, complex and vital. Disagreement is a bedrock. It's a foundation for developing new thought. And the moment we just start agreeing on everything is the moment that we crumble as a civilization. We want to keep pushing up against each other. As Nietzsche said, let us divinely strive against one another, my friends, as enemies. We need the left and we need the right. We push up against each other, and hey, it's better that way than any other way. I'm pretty sure of that. When critics disagree, the artist is in accord with himself. We can forgive a man for making a useful thing as long as he does not admire it. The only excuse for making a useless thing is that one admires it intensely. I love that. The only excuse for making a useless thing is one admires it intensely. We do have an obligation with art. We have an obligation to admire it intensely, and that's enough. All art is quite useless. There you go, that's the preface. That's Oscar Wilde. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of those maxims. Let me know. And let me know if you've ever read The Picture of Dorian Gray and what you think of Oscar Wilde. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any recommendations for content you'd like to see, videos, questions to answer, then please leave them in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give a like and subscribe, because that tells me to keep making more content. Happy reading.